Rabbi Lapin, thank you so much for coming on InGrace today.
It's a great pleasure, and it's something I've really been looking forward to doing. I think you know I've been a fan of your work and of your late father, so thank you.
Thank you very much, and it is a wonderful thing to meet a person that knows the scriptures, and you teach the scriptures, and you have quite a following and very popular, but you also have the unusual position of being very conservative and also challenging Americans to be conservative when it comes to voting.
Being conservative in the American Jewish community is a lot like being a vegetarian at a cannibal picnic. It's definitely a minority, but it's not an invisible minority. It's probably about a quarter of those who identify as American Jews are conservative. And here's the most important thing to note about it, and it helps people understand that Judaism equals liberalism is an absolutely false equation. Because if that were not so, the more Jewishly committed people were, the more liberal they would be. I think I can say this with very little exception. Jews who take the 5 books of Moses seriously and regard it as God's message to mankind given to Moses on Mount Sinai tend to be politically conservative. At this point in history, it is vaguely conceivable that in some epidemic of conservatism that the biblical approach might be a pull back towards the center. But I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever in my mind that a biblical viewpoint in today's climate is very decidedly conservative. And I get profoundly worried when people say, well, religion is above politics and people shouldn't involve themselves or tarnish themselves. It's not like that. That is false and incredibly dangerous.
You're rare in that you believe that Christianity is essential to the success of this country. Being a Jewish rabbi, I don't know if I've heard that position, but I like it, and it to me makes sense. Expound on that for a second.
I don't believe that it is correct to speak about, many civilizations. There's this civilization, there's that. There isn't. There actually is only one civilization. And the proof of that is that it is the civilization to which people from every culture and every country in the world flock. And that is called Western civilization. Am I allowed to say that on this show?
You did. Yes.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Because you know that in some circles, looking favorably on Western civilization is a capital offense.
On this show, it's a breath of fresh air.
Good, all right, fine. I mean, I'm always nervous because I hate to offend inadvertently. When I offend, it's absolutely deliberately. And so Western civilization is rooted in the Bible, and that's the key thing to understand here. In other words, when we ask awkward questions, like, in 2017, over 5,000 people drowned in the Mediterranean trying to get from Africa to Europe, and in 2018, the number was about the same. How many people do you think have drowned in the Mediterranean in small rickety boats trying to sail from France and Italy to Algeria and to Libya? And the answer is nobody. And you phrase it that way, and people's response is understandable. They say, don't be ridiculous. It's obvious. Money is in Europe, poverty is in Africa, so obviously people are going in that direction. But all you're doing in that way is postponing the question, which is why. Why is it that no capital market ever arose indigenously in a non-Christian country? Never happened. Now, today you've got stock markets in Accra, in Ghana, and in Bangladesh, and in Bangkok, and in Beijing, and in Bombay. But stock markets were created in Amsterdam and London, cultures based on Christendom. And it's also absolutely correct to note that between the year roughly 1000 or 900 and the First World War, about a period of nearly 1,000 years, over 98% of all scientific, technological, mathematical, medical advances and discoveries occurred, I like this old-fashioned word, they occurred under Christendom. And in many, many cases, the scientists like Sir Isaac Newton were Bible-believing Christians. These things are not accidents. There is a reason why a biblical culture produces a civilization. And it's a civilization that people vote with their wallets and with their shoes. They want to come and be part of that civilization. And, you know, even the idea of a cleanliness, the idea that in order to be able to aspire towards our Father in heaven, we need to distance ourselves from our bodily waste. That part of being civilized is you don't leave the bodily waste lying around where you go about your daily business. Now, in many, many non-Christian societies around the world, you will find human sewage running in little rivers down the streets and alleys of towns. But that's not the case in a biblical idea. In other words, we have the words in Deuteronomy that even a soldier under the duress of war has to carry a little shovel to make sure that he can deal with these things. And so it's not an accident that, 200 years ago, bathrooms in Bombay and Bangkok and Beijing were holes in the ground. And if you were very upper class, there was a place to put your feet. But it was pretty primitive, and you were basically living in filth and stench.
Well, we've had some experience in India. In one of our first train rides, we went into the bathroom. It's funny we even use the word bathroom on a train, but anyways. Yeah. And there was a hole in the toilet, and it was the tracks. I mean, probably today, that's still how it is, on the tracks.
Yeah. Well, what happened is that by that time, already in the West, proper waterborne sewage was being employed. And so today, at this time in the 21st century, it's just interesting to ask, did Bombay and Bangkok and Beijing convert Bristol and Birmingham and Boston to their way? Or did they adopt the bathroom system of Bristol and Birmingham and Boston? And the answer is pretty obvious. So it's really important to understand how critical the Bible has been in the development of human society towards civilization, which really finds its peak in the United States of America, the greatest engine of freedom and prosperity the world has ever seen, and at the same time, the place in which a greater proportion of the population owns, loves, and knows the Bible than any other place on earth.
20 years ago, you wrote a book, yes, America's Real War.
Yes.
And in that book, you said that America was in decline and in crisis, I think was the chapter.
Yes.
So 20 years forward,
yeah,
where are we today?
We're further down the road to crisis. If I can employ a metaphor that of which I'm fond, things that are very big and heavy have a lot of momentum to them. Bicycle, you stop pedaling and you come to a stop in a few yards, but a diesel locomotive, when you turn off the power, might run for 2 miles still, just because it's got so much momentum. A country like the United States of America has enormous momentum to it. And even when you turn off the power, it runs on the fumes in the gas tank for quite a long time. So the slide is fairly slow and fairly long from appearing to be perfectly normal and filled with vitality and vigor to a point where decline and decay is obvious to everybody. That can take 30 years, can take 40 years, but not much more than that. So at this point, America still has plenty of people who can remember and I see about 1962 as the point at which the aggressive steamroller thrust of secularism began to roll over American society. But you can't label an epoch by a date. But I find the arrival of the birth control pill in 1962 to be a convenient date, because that really changed or began to change sexual morality in very, very serious ways. And so back then, it's not an exaggeration to say that women could walk safely in any park, in almost any American city at any time of the day or night. Can you believe that? But that's true. It's also true to say that back then, a middle-class family could live an enviable lifestyle on the earnings of one person Women didn't have to work. And we have to ask ourselves, what's gone up since then? Has food gone up? No. What's gone up is anything that the government, and again, a left-leaning government for many, many years, anything the government is involved with, taxation, university tuition, those are the things that have skyrocketed in that period, making it absolutely essential for wives and mothers to double up as also income earners. Things have really changed in this country. I'll tell you something else. Today, our high school students will jive and bop to lyrics that are so brutal and so obscene that they would have made a criminal incarcerated in a penitentiary in 1950 blush. Nobody listened to that sort of music. Nobody spoke like that. These are very, very serious milestones on the slippery slide down to decadence and ultimately oblivion for a society.
What are we to do? There's an election coming up. We have choices in the presidential election and all the way down tickets. What should Americans do coming up in November?
This is it's an awkward question to answer because the left has been so startlingly effective in demonizing conservatism. But I'm going to accept your invitation on its face value and say what I, as an Orthodox Jewish rabbi, teach and believe to be absolutely the case. I think it is correct to say that we have to recognize liberalism to be just the polite cousin of the really bad-tempered uncle who we always worry is going to show up for Thanksgiving. The bad-tempered uncle is hardcore socialism verging on communism. The polite relative, but still very much a part of the same way of thinking, is liberalism. They've come up with a great word for it, progressivism, because who could possibly be opposed to progress? And I think it's really important to understand that the unifying characteristic of progressivism, or whatever that you want to see on that spectrum of communism, socialism, leftism, progressivism, it's all the same idea. The fundamental unifying characteristic is hostility to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and his message to mankind we call the Bible. That is what it really is. So, and we've got to understand that very, very clearly, that the left sees as its guiding principle, and that's why no on capital punishment and yes on abortion. Illogical. But that's the way it's got to be. Why are you willing to expend precious political capital on trying to establish that there is no difference between men and women and that guys should be able to use the girls' restroom? Why are you expending so much capital on? Because you're talking about a fundamental principle of our belief system. The Bible says male and female, he created them. Therefore, our mission is to undo that. It's as simple as that. And the corollary of that is that if liberalism is essentially the obliteration of the influence of the Bible on humanity, then surely conservatism can only be seen correctly as the preservation of that. And one of the great tragedies in Republican leadership is ongoing, decade after decade, an ongoing determination by Republican mandarins, and many of whom I've been friendly with over the years, but a determination to find a way to sever the link between conservative politics and God. And that can't be done. It's like detaching a rose from a plant and bringing it indoors. And it looks like a really good idea until it starts dying. And all the other roses on the rose bush are still doing fine. When conservatism is detached from its religious roots, it dies. That's all there is to it. So what's happened is that, again, God is choosing to use perhaps an imperfect leader. It wouldn't be the first time, and it's certainly not going to be the last. And in 2016, against all odds, all the clever, smart people in the country in whose company I do not place myself, not out of modesty, but out of self-defense, and all of them were sure that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And that's not how it worked out. And so I would say, and I think this really is our last chance, because we still have in America people who remember how it used to be. Now, you're not even allowed to say that, because if I speak nostalgically about the 1950s, oh, you're opposed to civil rights, you want to bring back slavery, you want to turn back the clock. You know what? I'm deaf to that rubbish. The truth is that life in America for ordinary Americans, including minorities, was far better in 1950 than the civil rights bills ended up causing considerable damage. And Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was a wonderful senator, a great American, Democrat, by the way, back in the day, and he spoke about what the Civil Rights Act did to the Black family in America. Tremendous damage. Thomas Sowell, Walter Williams are Black economists who speak about how much good progress was being made until civil rights legislation. So, you know, it had its good parts, it had its bad parts. Let's just be honest about that. It didn't bring about paradise for anybody. And today's streets in Chicago and in Wisconsin and elsewhere prove that it didn't. So I don't think there's any question about it. I think time is very, very short. And it is absolutely incumbent upon anybody who believes that the Bible is God's plan for human interaction, for anybody who believes that the Bible is the blueprint for human society. Time is very short. Such a person will do everything he or she can to make sure that Donald Trump is reelected for a second term, and most importantly, that he has a Republican Senate and a Republican Congress. Now, I don't think the Republicans have always been perfect, but other than you and I, who is these days, right? So one lives in a real world, and the real world is a world of choices. If I choose to spend money on a restaurant meal, then that means I got less to spend tomorrow on whatever else I had intended for discretionary income. Everything is a choice. And that's part of what life is about. And that's part of why we have such a central verse in the Bible, which is, therefore, choose life. Do you really have to tell people to choose? Yeah, you actually do.
Wow.
You actually do. And on November the 3rd, we all have the choice. Do we choose life, or do we make, God forbid, a choice that will plunge America into darkness, that really will, without any question whatsoever, reduce us as a force no longer to be reckoned with in the world, which means it's bad for everybody.
So we've had these crazy things happening this year.
Yes.
Of course, the riots you've already commented on, but the pandemic. Give me your opinion on the pandemic in light of just world history and all the things that we know about the Bible, and then two, the way we've handled it.
One of the casualties of eviscerating the biblical influence on a society is that we always seek a substitute. Now, it's absolutely clear. People will believe in something, because for most human beings, the notion that we're born and we eat and we defecate and procreate and die is unacceptable. There has to be more to life than that. It's called meaning. Mm-hmm. The two main ways to place meaning in your life is either through the big G of God or through the little g of government. You are going to believe in one of those two things. And if you choose to believe in the little g of government, then no longer is there such a thing as divine wisdom. And now we learn to trust experts. And that is one of the most dangerous things that has happened to America. I must say, I flee in total terror whenever I hear the words, experts say. No, let me out of here. Or something just as bad is studies reveal. Look, studies will reveal whatever you want them to reveal. There is a scoundrel at work when you hear the word studies reveal. because it's going to reveal exactly what it wants it to reveal. Nobody shows the studies that reveal ideas contrary to theirs. So I say this because I believe that the coronavirus has been shockingly ineptly handled. I think it may well turn out when the history books are written of the 21st century. I think with the wisdom of hindsight, provided Donald Trump wins in 2020 and there actually is a future to this country, I do believe people will look back and say, how did they do this? Surely one of the worst mistakes ever made in American history. Really? How did they do this? For heaven's sake, I do this on the radio all the time. I ask callers how many Americans die on American roads every year. And the answer is over 35,000, almost without exception, sometimes considerably higher. But that's a good average. If saving lives is all that matters, then we have a way of saving 35,000 lives every year. Move a national speed limit to 15 miles an hour and rigorously enforce it. And if my mission is saving lives in America, that's what I will work to do. Because to a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, as the old aphorism would have it. And so if I am a doctor and my concern is public health, I prohibit anyone driving over 15 miles an hour. I also prohibit scuba diving and mountain climbing. They cannot be practiced. If public health is the issue, then anything goes. I will also mention that in Europe, as recently as the 20th century, murder of Jews was justified on the grounds of public health. When you frighten people with the issues of public health, they will do almost anything. And so my belief is that this was shockingly badly handled. Yes, it is a disease, but like every other disease, there is such a thing as eventual herd immunity. Will some people die? Yeah, most people aren't even aware of how many Americans die per day on average. We're a country of 320 million people, and people age. And every day, a very large number of people die. And I also know, and this I saw in an April release from the Center for Disease Control, guidelines on how to label deaths, to tend towards labeling deaths as corona or COVID-19 related. I believe that a large part, look, yeah, there was an epidemic, no question about it. Did it require a lockdown that destroyed people? Of course not. Do we know yet what the death toll is of people who were not able to keep their appointments for breast cancer mammograms? Do we know what the death toll is of people who were not able to get heart disease and diagnosed? No, we don't know. The lockdown carried huge public health costs. But it was driven, I think, to a large extent for political reasons. I know that if, God forbid, Joe Biden wins in November, there'll be a miraculous vanishing of the crisis. It'll all be solved, with no doubt a vaccine invented by Joe in his basement. I mean, look, that's how I see this. I'm sorry. Yes, I know people who were sick. Yes, I know people who lost their lives. I even know some people who were younger who do not have underlying causes. But overwhelmingly, I think it's been a disaster in the way it's been handled.
Well, thank you so much for your comments and your love for this country. We appreciate you. We love the Jewish people. And thank you for standing for the truth of the Scriptures.
No, it's a pleasure. And I appreciate the opportunity of being together with you. And I hope that perhaps next time I have a chance to be with you, I'll let you know how I really feel about some things.
It is refreshing, by the way, just to hear, what this is how it is.
Look, I've got two choices. I can massage you with warm butter or I can tell the truth, but I can't do both.
I'll take the truth. Thank you.